Shavua Tov, Shavua Tov, everyone. Shavua Tov, Judith. Okay, so we have a custom. Thank you, Judith. We have a custom to tell the story of the Baal Shem Tov on Motzaei Shabbos. So here's actually a fascinating story of the Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov had a known close student and who traveled many times with the Baal Shem Tov in his various travels, never knew not to ask any questions and never to doubt his master, the Baal Shem Tov. And on one of these travels, his student Reb Zev Kitzur is going with the Baal Shem Tov to this small village because the Baal Shem Tov, Shavua Tov, Ariel, the Baal Shem Tov wanted to see a specific Jew that he wanted to ask something from him. So together, Reb Zev and the Baal Shem Tov traveled to this Jew, to this village Jew who was extremely, extremely poor, very limited resources and income. He had a small little piece of land that he rented from the landlord, and he had a cow that provided him with a little parnasa, a little livelihood. And on the arrival, Baal Shem Tov comes to him and he tells this fellow who he knew the Baal Shem Tov. He said, "Listen, I really need you to give me, for a special cause, 18 ruble." The 18 ruble for this person was impossible. He was not liquid at all. He had no available funds, and he didn't even have where to get the money from. So in order for him and he knew if the Baal Shem Tov asks for 18 rubles, he asks no question. And Reb Zev is looking at the situation, but silent, and obviously wondering a bit. So the fellow says, "Give me a little bit of time," and he quickly runs and he sells some of the things in his house. And he even sells his cow, which is the source of his income. So he could have the 18 ruble to give to the Baal Shem Tov. And he gathers the money together, he gives the Baal Shem Tov 18 ruble, and the Baal Shem Tov leaves. So time comes, the end of the month, and he has to pay his landlord his rent. And because he doesn't have a source of income, he gets evicted. And his situation is really bad. So he figures he'll go try his luck at another location. So he goes to another village with a new landlord, and he gets a tiny, tiny little place. He sells more of his things, and he's able to buy a second cow. And this cow gives milk, and he earns this mamish, a very, very, very tiny living from it. He can mamish just get by to feed his family, just about. And time goes on. One day, the landlord's cow becomes ill, and the landlord has no fresh milk. So one of the servants who knew about this Jewish person's milk and his cow says, "Well, there's a fellow who rents land from you. Maybe his cow could provide for you some milk until you get a new cow." So they go down and they buy some milk from him, and the landlord tastes the milk, and he's like, "This is the most fabulous milk I've ever tasted." Go back to the Jew and tell him that I want to be his only client. I want to sign a contract. I will buy all his milk. And so fine, at least he has life a little bit easier, because now he has just one client, and he comes every day to the pirates, to the landlord's estate, and he brings him his milk, and every time he drinks it, and he's just mamish, like each time is like the first time he tasted this milk. And as time goes on, they start to become friendly. He talks to him, and he starts telling him about his different businesses. The landlord tells the Jewish person and asks for his advice, and slowly he starts to involve him a little bit in his business, and things start to turn. And he becomes more and more involved in the businesses of the landlord, and obviously it helps with his income. So much to the point that the landlord, who is childless, decides that he wants to retire, to the beaches and the sun. So he decides who's the best person to take over his responsibilities as the landowner. He gives everything to this Jewish fellow. He's now the new landowner, and he trusts him that he'll do a good job and a fair job, and he leaves. Many years later, Reb Zev Kitzur, again the student of the Baal Shem Tov, is traveling for the Baal Shem Tov for a situation of Pidyon Shvuin. They needed to rescue a family that's been thrown into prison by another landlord for whatever the issue was at the time. And he collected enough money. He was short the last 300 ruble. So he comes to he comes to this village, and he sees everyone's in their Shabbos attire. They're all dressed in their Shabbos clothing during the week. He said, "What's happening?" He goes, "Well, the landlord is coming to see us, so we want to greet him in our best clothing." So the rabbi said to him, he said, I know you're here to collect your 300 ruble. The landlord is Jewish. Maybe he'll help you. So he decides to join them. Maybe they'll help in his cause. So Reb Zev goes with the community elders to go meet the landlord. And the landlord is looking at Reb Zev the whole time and paying him special attention as he's talking. He calls over Reb Zev after the meeting, and he says, "You don't recognize me, but here's the 300 rubles that you need." And that was their conversation. When Reb Zev makes it back to the Baal Shem Tov, he realizes who this person was. This was none other than the villager, where the Baal Shem Tov demanded 18 rubles, and he had to sell all his possessions, including his income, in order to provide the Baal Shem Tov with his 18 ruble. When he comes to the Baal Shem Tov, the Holy Baal Shem Tov tells him like this. He says, "I saw that in heaven, this person was destined to be able to have big changes in his life, to have huge bracha for wealth and success. But in heaven, it was decided that the bracha is not going to happen where he lives. He has to move. In Mishana Makim, Mishana Mazel, when he changes his new location, that's when he's going to get the blessing." So the Baal Shem Tov realized that if he's just going to wait it out, it could take years for him to leave his situation. So Baal Shem Tov specifically traveled to ask him to give him an amount of money he knew he couldn't afford, which would cause him to get evicted, which would cause him to leave. And that's how he got his bracha. So that's another wonderful story of the mysteries and the ways of the Holy Baal Shem Tov. So Shavuot Tov on the story, and now let's go to the laws of Shabbos. Hold on, Spila. Hold on a second. Let's share the page. We're starting a new chapter, the chapter of the laws of Shema. Okay, so let's find it here. Here we go. Okay, we're holding chapter 17, Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, the laws of reading the Shema. Okay, so it says like the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch says like this. You see, I have some charts on top. We'll maybe go over it this week or next to understand better the Zmanim, Jewish times, and how we divide the days. We discussed this many times about the day. A Jewish day is 12 hours, always 12 hours light and 12 hours dark. It means a regular day, sometimes in the winter you'll have a few hours of light and less hours and you have more hours of a few hours of light and many hours of dark. And the summer, vice versa, you'll have less hours of dark and more hours of light. But on the Jewish watch, so to say, Zmanim is always 12 hours. The difference is in the minutes. In the winter, the minutes will be longer, and in the summer, the minutes will be shorter. So the length of an hour depends on winter and summer and location, obviously. But there's always 12 hours of day and 12 hours of night. So when we say chatzos, midday in Torah, it's always the 12th hour. And chatzos at night is always the 12th hour. But again, the question is how we count the hours. Okay, so he says, we have to, why are we talking about Zman? Because when we talk about Shema, which is a mitzvah, the Iraisa, it's a biblical commandment, we have to know from when till when can we start saying the Shema to satisfy our obligation of saying the Shema. So he says like this. He starts off, Haschol Zman Krias Shema shel Shachris. When can one start saying the Shema in the morning of Shachris? Hu Kumay Zman Tefillin is the same time when the men can put on Tefillin. V'nimshach Zmana, and it continues Ad Revi'as Hayom, till 1/4 of the day. So that's 3 hours. The first 3 hours of the day is the time for saying the Shema. Again, that's why when you check on the calendar, when is the Zman Krias Shema? It's not going to always be the same time, even though it goes. What Sof Zman Krias Shema means? When does the Shema end and begin? It's going to vary on the days of the winter, the summer, and where you're located. You always have to check the calendar of the place you're located of what are the times that are what is the first 3 hours of the day. Bein shayoim aruch, bein shehu katzer. It doesn't make a difference if the day itself is long, like the summer, or if the day is short. Benechshev hayoim. So, and when do we start? Okay, so we know that it's from the beginning of the first 3 hours of the day until we finish the first quarter of the day, which is the first 3 hours. But when does the first hour start of the day? We start the day min alois, from alos hashachar until tzeisak chavim, until the stars come out. That is considered the days. That's the 12 hours of the day. So we'll see in a second when it's not always clear when is we say the alos hashachar is daybreak, but the definition of daybreak is not is a machlokas. Means when do we start counting the day, and how we understand the beginning of day and how we understand the shkia and the beginning of evening. Mitzvah min hamuvchar. He says the best mitzvah would be likris kivatikim, would be to read the Shema like the Vatikin, which means the pious people, that love the mitzvahs, which is usually a term used for people who wake up early. Vatikin, like when you say Vatikin minyan, if you're ever in a place and you're in a conversation, they say I daven vasikin. What does vasikin mean? Vasikin means the pious people. Why are they pious? Because they daven in the earliest time. So the custom is to try to say Shema, Shayim Mechavnim. He describes what does Vatikin minyan mean. They organize it, they work it out. Each day they have and they work it out to daven to read the Rebecca, to read the Shema a little bit before the sun rises, which is later than daybreak. We'll see when that is. So that they could complete Shema and its blessings. As the sun rises, and then start the Amidah. So the minyan Vatikim, the way the Vatikin works is, again, that's of the pious people, is to try to daven the Shema a little bit before sunrise. So when they finish the Shema and its blessings before, and the Vayatziv and Ezras and Gal Yisrael, to finish exactly when the Nates hits, when the sun starts to rise, and then they say the Shemona Esrei exactly at Nates. Okay, so and then they do the tefillah, means the prayer means the Amidah, the Shemona Esrei, the 18 blessings. And those who are able to do that, to make sure to daven in such a way where they say the Shema Vatikin, which means a little bit before sunrise, and so they can complete the brachas to say the Shemona Esrei, the Amidah at Nates, at sunrise itself. So the Kitzur says, Schare meruba ma'id. That person, he or she has great reward for knowing to daven early. And that's why they call it Vatikin Minyan. So it's either will be called, if you want to know familiar language, and someone says, I daven Vasikin, it's referring to someone who davens to make sure they say Shema a little bit before sunrise, and so exactly the Shemona Esrei, to do it exactly at Nates. Or they'll say, I daven Nates Minyan. So if someone says, I daven Nates Minyan, or Vatikin Minyan, they're referring to the same Minyan, same time. Either they're emphasizing on the Vasikin, which is a name given to the people that do it, or the Nates is when they do it. Now, if you go into a Nates or Vasikin Minyan, I daven all the time when I can. Now, for instance, right now we're getting ready for Nates when I sit here in Jerusalem. But when I have an opportunity to daven Nates, I do. And so the way it works is the Gabbai. It's not like a simple minyan where you say, okay, we're davening at 8:00. They'll have times. You have to map it out. You can't just try to figure out to make sure to daven the Shemona Esrei exactly at sunrise. So first of all, you have to know when that time is, and then work backwards. How long does it take me to get from when we start brachot or from when we start hodu, depending where you start, till the Neitz HaChama, until Shemona Esrei. So if you need 20 minutes, so they'll start 20 minutes before Nates, or 30 minutes before Nates, whatever the system is of that minyan, and they'll usually have a piece of paper, I've seen, where they don't just say, okay, we're starting 20 minutes before 5:43. But they say, you have to be by Baruch Sha'amar at this time, by Yishtabach at that time, Shema at this time, So Shemona Esrei, and they don't just write Be Shemona Esrei at 5:45. It'll be 5:45 and 13 seconds because they want to do nets to the second. And you'll have a lot of people they have their clocks. That shul usually has a very exact clock by the Amid. It's a whole OCD concept going on, but it's an idea to daven exactly at nates. Okay, so here, and if you can do that, you have great reward. Okay, that's if you can do it. But he continues, either way. One thing for sure you have to be careful. If you can't daven with the nates / vesikin minyan, you have to make sure that you're holding the Shema by no longer than the first quarter of the day. Again, so that makes a difference if you're davening in the winter, and where you're davening in the winter, right? In Seattle, daybreak today is probably close to 7 o'clock, whereas in Jerusalem it's much earlier. And in New York it's later also, then it's earlier than 7 o'clock. Comes the winter, summer, that's the reverse issue, right? You have to be careful in the summer. The Kitzur says, where they lived, meaning in Europe, which is north of Eretz Yisrael, primarily, we're talking about in Poland and Hungary, Ukraine. So then it is, in the summer is longer days. More north you go, right? He says sometimes the quarter of the day could be before 7 in the morning. Is when Sof's Mag Krishma is. It means you have to be finished the Shema before that. Now, we're going to learn these ways that you don't have to be holding davening. If you need to, you could just say the Shema. But to do the mitzvah, the actual mitzvah of the time is the first quarter of the day, which means, like he's saying, if you're north and you're in the more north you are, which means that the break comes in earlier. So the earlier the nates finish, the Zman finishes. It can finish before 7 in the morning. We come up with the evidim over Azman, but let's say you passed 7 o'clock. You passed the first quarter of the day. Okay, so then it's permitted to read the Shema and its blessings, meaning the davening, the tefillah, until 1/3 of the day. So the mitzvah is the first quarter of the day, but you're allowed to read the Shema with its blessings into the first third of the day, which obviously gives you more, 1/8 of the time more. Aval, I think that's the math. Aval achar shlisha yom, but after 1/3 of the day, asher lemar brachas, then already you can't daven chakras anymore. Then you should say the Shema. So he writes in the parentheses that not everyone agrees with what he says in the original text, that after 1/3 of the day you shouldn't daven chakras. There's those who say that you could say chakras also until much later and throughout the day. Okay, let's see the footnotes, and then we'll get some charts to give us a little bit of visual of when these times are. Okay, the earliest Shema and putting on tefillin. When there is a sufficient light to so what is that time? Which is called Mishiyakir. So Mishiyakir means when you see, he says, when there is sufficient light to recognize to recognize a slight acquaintance at a distance of 6 feet, you may read the Shema. So when could you read the Shema? From if you're within 6 feet of someone, or someone who's a kind of acquaintance, you recognize them, so then that's already, Mishiyakir means when you recognize. Others say recognizing colors. So when you recognize someone from a distance of 6 feet, then already it's light enough when you could start saying the Shema. That's not the Netzachama. It's not sunrise. That's when you could say the Shema, and that's when you could put on film. Means, for instance, very few days in, let's say, depending how north you go. If you go further, Vancouver, I'm not sure if it's that much different than Seattle. If you go to Alaska, obviously the problem gets much more complicated. But when you're talking about putting on tefillin, when Mishiyakir, sometimes it means you're not allowed to daven before Mishiyakir. You could daven before the nets, but you can't daven Mishiyakir. You put on tefillin, you can't make a bracha on tefillin Mishiyakir, which means from Mishiyakir means when the word Yakir means when you recognize someone within 6 feet, right? So if it's Seattle, sometimes very really in the earliest of the winter mornings, you could have it that before 7 o'clock is the earliest you could put on film. Maybe sometimes it's 6:58, 6:57. It could get that dark. It could get that late. Which, forget about the nates. It's not that the sunrise is not too much later, but even to put on tefillin is not allowed before, let's say 6:58, 6:57. Obviously, you have to check your calendar. Okay. Footnote number two. Daybreak until the stars are visible means how long is the day? This refers to the three medium-sized stars. So when it's considered that the stars are out, again, there's plenty of calendars online that will tell you your location, even your specific location, that will tell you what your zmanim are. But if you want to know the idea, when the day starts is Mishiyakir, is when you can put on tefillin, which is when you recognize a slight acquaintance from within 6 feet, and until the visible three medium stars, that's the hours of the day. And they're divided into 12 portions, 12 hours. Are visible. Okay, now we're starting to get into opinions about understanding Zmanim. The Gra, meaning the Gaon of Vilna, holds that the day is reckoned from sunrise to sunset, assuming that from daybreak to sunrise is 72 minutes. Okay, so the Gra says that the day hours is sunrise to sun is the sun hold on a second. Okay, again, it says over here, he says over here, what is the day? The day is from Alois until Tseis. Okay, from when daybreak until the stars go out. He quotes the Gra. The Gra says that when's the day hours? He counts the day is from sunrise, which is before daybreak, after daybreak, to sunset, assuming that from daybreak to sunrise is 72 minutes, and from sunset to the visibility of the stars is 72 minutes. It means from Shkia until Tseis, Shkia means sunset, until the stars come out will take another 72 minutes. The time of reading the Shema is extended by 36 minutes. So then in that case you could extend, let's see the chart. The Shema for an additional 36 minutes when it is that daybreak is 72 minutes before the Tseis, the Nates. Let me see this again. Okay, we'll see it in the chart and hold on a second. Okay, footnote number 4. So we have 3. Footnote number 4 is, where is that one? Let's just go down here. Footnote number 4 is, this applies to Hungary with authorized. And he says, okay, that sometimes it can be 7 o'clock in the morning. The author was in Hungary. So Hungary was, Eastern Europe. Okay, so number 5 is some authorities hold that the brachas may be also recited the entire day. This is the opinion of the Rambam and the Pri Chadash, Maimonides and the Pri Chadash. The entire day. There's a third opinion that the brachas may be recited only till noon. Okay, so we have 3 opinions about when you could daven Shachris, morning prayer, which includes the Shema. Preferably the first quarter of the day, extended till the first third of the day. The Kitzur himself says that's it. After that, you can't daven anymore. In the parentheses, he mentions the opinion of the Pri Chadash, which is also the opinion of the Rambam, the entire day. That means until sunset, which is Shkia, you can daven Shachris. The third opinion is that he says is until Chatzos, midday. Again, midday is not 12 o'clock. Midday is midday of the up to 6 hours of the day hours. Okay, whatever the day hours is, depending on the winter or the summer. Okay, let's just take some charts. There's a lot of, it's not, I mean, the easiest, obviously, just without the knowledge of what you have to do or how you're doing it, is to go online and check a reliable source that will tell you when are the Zmanim. You say, if you're in Seattle, what are the Zmanim? What are the times for Seattle? And it'll tell you, if you go to Chabad.org, it will tell you that daybreak starts here and sunrise starts there. So and sunrise starts there, and etc. etc. So here we're going to have okay. Here we have all the Zmanim broke down. So we'll try to go through them a little bit and then open to questions. We have a few more minutes till the end of the class. What we know as Alos HaShachar, we said this day starts Alos HaShachar, he calls it dawn, starts. So let's say the Shulchan Aruch, the Alter Rebbe says like this. When does Alos HaShachar start? Start of day for Shema and prayer, which is called Alos. Debated calculation 72, 90, up to 120 minutes before sunrise. Okay, so there's three opinions. It either starts 72 minutes, 90, or 120 minutes before sunrise is when it's called Alos. And therefore, if you go on, actually, there's someone who broke it down, the Alter Rebbe, the Shulchan Aruch Harav, that means the first Chabad Rebbe, who we go by in his Shulchan Aruch. According to some, the way they understand this manim, the Alter Rebbe's Alos is very early. Like if you want to know, when is it sometimes really important to know Alos? Let's say you want to stay up all night, on the nights that we stay up all night, like let's say the 7th of Pesach is the custom to stay up all night. The night of Shavuos, right? The first night of Shavuos, people stay up all night to learn Torah. So if you want to know when's the Alos, so if you if you go according to certain opinions, it could be as early as 120 minutes before sunrise. In the summer, let's say Shavuos by night, that could be somewhere 2:30 in the morning, because Shavuos is already towards the summer, and then so dawn will be at 120 before sunrise, which could be 2:20. In Seattle, will be even earlier, right? So depending on there's the difference between when Alos starts, which is when you could start saying Shema, is 72, 90, 120 minutes before sunrise. Stringent to follow all the opinions for fast shurim. Okay, another significant question. When does a fast start? Let's say you want to fast a day fast, and you want to eat before the fast, according to the conditions that you can do that. For instance, if before you go to sleep, you make a point to kind of in your mind to make the resolution to wake up early, so as if to eat before the fast. Otherwise, if you don't make that plan before, you just happen to wake up in the morning before Alos, you can't eat. So the question is, until when could you have your coffee? Right now, we had a fast. This past month, the 10th of Teves, right? So the fast was the fast could have started at 6 o'clock in the morning. You could wake up at 5 and have a coffee and breakfast, right? So you have to know when that time is. So he's saying to be strict in everything. So strict, when it's more strict to go with 72 minutes, go with 72. Means don't say Shema till 72. When it's strict to go with 120, don't consider your fast starting 120. Fine, that's a big spectrum of time. Okay, what's Mishiakar? He said one can recognize another. That's after dawn. Earliest time of Shema lechatchila. When's the best time to say Shema? So officially you could start at dawn. But when's the time to start? Lechatchila means initially when's the best time, and to put on tefillin is when you recognize, it's called Mishiyakir, enough light to recognize person 4 cubits away, which we said is 6 feet. So to recognize someone 6 feet away, up until that point, again, you should not put on tefillin, and lechatchila, better not to say the Shema. Next is Netzach Hama, sunrise, used as start point for calculating the proportional hours in many zmanim. So many times start from Netzach Hama, from when the sun rises. Also, for instance, like we said, davening Shemoneh Esrei should not be done before the Netz, which is the sunrise. The people who daven Vatikin and Netz, that doesn't mean that they start saying Hodu, the beginning of prayer at sunrise, but the Shemoneh Esrei at sunrise, which means you have to say the Shema before and calculate the time backwards. Sof Zman Krishma. Okay, let's just stop. We're going to stop in the next. Do one more. When is the last time you could say Shema? So we said there's many opinions. Lechatchila b'diavad, which means the initial time is up to the first quarter of that day, could be extended to the first third of the day, and questionably if you could go past that. Must say Shema within 3 zmaniyos, means 3 zman hours from sunrise. Later view Baal Hatanya Gra. Though many are stringent to earlier Magen Avram time. So this is where if you're going to go online and say when Sof Zman Krishma, you'll see the Magen Avram has a time and the Gra has a time. Here we're having the chart. We're not going to explain the difference, but the question is when they start calculating. They start calculating from Alos, or they start calculating from Nates. But the Alter Rebbe and the Gra have a later time for Shema. Those who go according to the opinion of Magen Avram, was a very important opinion on the Shulchan Aruch. have a earlier time. So again, if you go online, we'll stop here and we'll continue the chart next week. If you go online and you are and you see it says Sof Zman Shema, when's the last you could say the Shema, according to the opinion of the Gra and the Baal and the Alter Rebbe, which is accepted, what people use, that will be your Sof Zman Lechatchila. Then again, the question is, can you extend it to the third of the day, to half of the day, to the entire day, to daven the Shacharis and say the Shema? Again, and also if you're in a situation where you're not going to daven in the right time, it's important to make sure you say the Shema beforehand. And then if you're a man, there's a question if you put on the tefillin or not. But definitely, if let's say you daven on Shabbos late and you go to shul late, definitely make sure if you know that the time that you're going to be saying the Shema in shul, not when the shul starts davening, but when you're going to say the Shema in shul is going to be after this man. Make sure you say the full Shema, at least the first two paragraphs before the davening, before you go to shul. All right, any questions? Wonderful. Have a Shavua Tov, everyone. See you, B'ezras Hashem, next week.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Wait,
Shavua Tov.
actually, I do have a question. Till what time can women say chakras? Because I was taught that it's until chatzos.
Okay, so that's the question we discussed. He in the Kitzur brought down three opinions. The Kitzur himself says first third of the day. There is opinions, the Pri Chadash, the Rambam, that says you could say, but most people are lenient to go according to the Rambam Pri Chadash in situations where there's no choice. That even men will put on tefillin until and daven shachris until shkia. But there is the opinion that is until chatzos, which is half midday using 12 hours of zmanim. So in a case, you have who to rely on in any of the two cases, meaning there's who to rely on to try to get it in before chatzos. In a scenario that for whatever reason you couldn't, you have who to base this on to daven up until shkia.
Is it true that after if a woman for some reason can't say chakras until after chatzos, is it true that she's supposed to say mincha before she says chakras?
That we'll get to that. There's some opinions about that. It's not only for women, but there's some opinions about that.
Okay,
Okay.
thanks. Thank you.
Shavua tov,
Shavua tov.
everyone.